Taylor Casper, owner and managing attorney of the Winslow Divorce, go through the process with confidence so that they're entitled to. And I'm here today with Rachel. Rachel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Rachel Kennedy. I'm the founder and principal mediator at Rachel Kennedy Mediation.
Cool, cool, cool. So we're here today because we want to talk just a little bit for people about how to prepare for mediation. So I thought maybe to start, we want to just give them a quick kind of intro or definition of what mediation is and how maybe I see mediation from a lawyer's perspective versus how you as the mediator see mediation, and how that plays a role. So I know for me, and I'll let you speak to yourself because it's a little bit different for you, but I know for me, we see almost every single case that we have go through the mediation process. Mediation is just a venue for our clients and for people walking through divorce to or custody issues to come together with a neutral third party to kind of work through those issues themselves, as opposed to putting the issues before the court and having the court make a decision for their family and for their finances. So it's a venue that kind of helps people have support in coming up with their own resolutions. And just about everybody goes through mediation, because of unless you can independently figure out everything for yourselves. And for me, my clients come to me, they're getting a divorce, and that is something we actually really promote at my office is like, all right, great, let's get you into a mediation setting with the other attorney, with the other the opposing party, your soon to be ex, so that we can figure out as much as we can collaboratively together before we start having motions and taking things to the court. How do you see mediation in your day to day?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I really resonate with what you said about kind of trying to make your own decisions before we bring it before a court. That's really what I'm passionate about. I always tell people, however we got to this point, whatever, people get divorced, it happens. But regardless, you two have been running and managing your family for however many years now. Let's try to keep it that way. And obviously, you're probably not communicating super well, or you wouldn't be here. That's where I come in, and I'm happy to facilitate those conversations. And I know what conversations need to be had, and I'm used to having those conversations. I honestly pretty much only deal with divorces. So that's what I do every day. But my goal is to help you guys to come to those resolutions on, like, we've been managing our family. Let's continue to do that, even though we're going to be living separately. So it's going to look different, but how can we make those decisions? Because what I tell people all the time is literally nobody cares more about your kids or your home or your future finances than you do.
Mhm.
Guaranteed. As
Yeah.
much as your lawyer loves you, as much as your mediator loves you, as much as the judge says that they want to be impartial, nobody cares as much about those intricate pieces of your life as you do. And my firm belief as a mediator is that you guys should be the ones to make those decisions. Um,
Yeah, that's powerful.
yeah. And I think I'm going to speak briefly just also to kind of our different roles, because a lot of people ask me about that in consults. And obviously you as an attorney focus on your one person hires you and you are focused on that person.
Mhm.
And I'm completely on the other end of the spectrum where I'm not hired by one person or the other. I actually often say my client is the space between the parties. Like,
Mhm.
I am legally and ethically obligated to remain neutral and to listen to person one, listen to person two, help facilitate that conversation. I will never say you should or you have to or whatever. That's kind of your job, Taylor, to advise your clients, with the legal advice. But I don't do that. I can't do that. That's not within my job scope.
Mhm.
So I think that's an important distinction too.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Job for as the person holding the space. I like that, right? Between everyone versus my side, like I'm there for my client and this is
Right.
what my client wants, needs, and what have you. I
Mhm.
think though what we've kind of established is that just about everybody's going through mediation, right?
Right.
Unless you can 100% figure it all out for yourself and there are no questions whatsoever, you're probably going to end up mediating one, if not several issues.
Right.
and you're divorced, right? And so I think we can also agree that people have a better experience in mediation if they show up prepared. It's more positive, and
Mhm.
the experience is more productive, which oftentimes means less expensive,
Right.
um, clearer if
Mhm.
they show up prepared. So there's kind of the two big buckets that we see people mediating. One, we have the family bucket, so what happens to your kids? And then we have the financial bucket, separating out those assets. The house is something that you mentioned. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you see people bringing up when they're mediating that family bucket?
That really, just like nobody loves your kids as much as you do, nobody understands the inner workings of your family the way that you do either. Actually, recently I've had a handful of cases where, for example, people have had really unique work situations, and we've had to talk through, okay, like maybe this parent has a fairly normal work schedule. This parent has some really interesting, they work overnights, or they work, shift one this week, shift two the other week, every other, or whatever, for whatever reason, they need to have a creative type of parenting time schedule that's going to work for their family. And people often come into my office and they're like, well, my friend is divorced and they said we had to pick between this or this parenting time schedule, and neither of those really work for us. And I'm like, cool. All right. Let's talk about what does work for you. If
Yeah.
you were to go to court, potentially the judge would pick either A or B. There are either the 5225 or the week on, week off. Those are probably the more typical schedules that we usually see, but that doesn't mean it has to be that way. We can be creative with what we need to do. Another thing I have seen a few times recently is people can be a little bit creative at times with child support. Like there was one where I think the dad was going to owe the mom like maybe $100 or $200 a month. It wasn't a significant amount, but it was a little bit. And they decided that they didn't want to go through the whole child support process. So they decided on their own, okay, dad's going to take care of kind of the extra things like the haircuts, the school supplies, the new tennis shoes, that kind of stuff. And they decided between the two of them that that's how they wanted to work out that financial piece regarding their child. And I was like, okay, like as long as you can justify this and it makes sense and the judge understands what it is that you're trying to accomplish, we can be creative if we need to figure out different things, that veer from what the courts will typically order.
Yeah, the norm. Yeah. I know I've seen where we've had a handful of doctors be on either one side of the litigation or the other, right? They're either my client or the other parent. And what we know about some people in roles like that is when they're going on to residency or they need to fulfill something in that medical training, sometimes they need to go out of state,
Mhm.
or they need to, maybe they want to go out of state to do one of those programs where, you used to, you could go open up a doctor's office in a rural place, and then they'd pay your student loans off for you.
Mhm.
You did
Mhm.
that. So we've seen people even moving out of state. And now we've got to get creative with the summer school year schedule and holiday time and things like that, and get
Mhm.
it to a place where it feels fair and equitable and like it's the best thing for the kids. Um, in light of the fact that, yeah, you can't do the 5225 or the week on, week off if that's your story. So I
Mhm.
think one of the tips I would give, or some of the tips I would give for getting really prepared to mediate that family bucket, would be one, get really clear on the day-to-day obligations of each of the parents. What is that work schedule? Who needs to be where by when? Who's going to be able to do pickup and drop offs for school? What are the needs of the kids? Like, what kind of schedules do the kids keep? Do the kids play a lot of sports? Do the kids get a bus to school? Does anybody live too far away from school? So I think just really getting clear about the actual day to day of the family is my best tip for preparing to mediate that family bucket.
Yep.
Cool, cool, cool. So the other part we have is the financial bucket. And you already mentioned some of the financial things that people have to get through, which are, child support being one, that family bucket. And you mentioned the house. What are some other things that come up for you in financial mediations that you see people asking about or trying to work out?
All kinds of things. Sometimes Both parties are on the titles of both cars. They have to figure out who's going to keep which one. And then sometimes they'll work out their budgets and they'll say, okay, this car is paid off. This car still has a payment. Typically, I've been driving this car, but I can afford the payment. The other person can't. So we're going to swap cars. Or I have one couple right now where one party has significantly more, like a few 401ks, and the other party has less in that area. So the one with more is just transferring a 401k to the other party. Or we've got certainly credit card debts, HELOCs, those types of like consumer debt where they're trying to figure out, okay, based on like whose name is it in, what's each of our income, what's each of our budget going to be after we move out. So who can afford to take these? I actually have one couple who recently made the choice to continue living together for like through this school year. So that's about another 8 months or so, partially for their child, but then also partially financially, because they figure if they're sharing those expenses for a little bit longer, they can really chip away at that debt. And then when they separate households next summer, ideally they'll have significantly less debt to try to separate when they're then trying to support two households on the same amount of income rather than one. So just lots of different issues financially.
Yeah, there's so much variability in what we see in divorces as well. Somebody might be a really high earner and somebody's a low earner. Or we've got two really high earners, but somebody's got a spending habit and the other person doesn't, or something like that.
Yeah.
There's homes, there's cabins, there's second homes, we bought an RV together and now who wants the RV that's depreciated in value? Who's even camping? So, we like, not me. So
Yeah.
we see all sorts of weird like assets people have to divide. I think one thing I saw really early on, and I was like, this is real. This actually happens, is a couple. They were much older. They had a coin collection
Okay.
with some really valuable coins and some that were likely junk. And we spent all this time in this divorce proceeding having these coins valued because they were like, one party was like, there's hiding money in this divorce. It's in the coins, right? Like literally. And I was like, I don't think many of them are worth much. And I think all in after the appraisal and all that, it was maybe a few $1,000s. I don't know if it was worth it for all that energy, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff. There's sentimental value when we're separating out the finances and the assets. I think one of the things that you have to remember too, which we can talk spousal maintenance forever, and maybe we will a whole other time, but just being really realistic that if your lifestyle is a 4-bed, 3-bedroom house in a decent suburb right now, when you get separated, you're probably not both going to be able to have
Right.
that. You're
Yeah.
right. You're going to probably have to make some changes to your lifestyle. If you've got high debt now, you're still going to have debt when you separate. And so just getting realistic is I think really important. It's something I try really hard to do with my clients. My best tip for getting prepared to mediate financially is bring everything to the table.
Mhm.
So it's annoying and it's onerous and cumbersome, but really do pull the house, the mortgage statement, the car note, your bank account statements around that time that you separated, because that's really what we're looking at is what did things look like at your date of separation? What's in the bank accounts? What debts do you have? How did you incur those? Did anybody have non-marital interests? So maybe sometimes you got to go back and think and look, when we bought the house, how did we buy it? Like,
Mhm.
did one spouse's parents give us a gift? Somebody inherit something? Are these proceeds from a non-marital home? So just bring as much as you can to the table, and then you can get out of your head, out of the emotions, and just look at the numbers and just what is fair. How do we just separate it out in a way that's fair? And that's probably the best thing that you could do to prepare for a mediation on those two issues. Rachel, any last words of advice for people as they contemplate mediation or get ready to walk into a mediation setting?
I think you hit on something when you're talking about kind of taking out the emotions, and like divorce is emotional. It just is. But if there's a way, people have therapists, or they meet their best friend for coffee, or they hire a divorce coach or whatever, like try to figure out a way to manage those emotions that's outside of the legal process, I think is really like I'm used to tears, I'm used to yelling. It happens. Like it is an emotional process. It's not fun. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But if there are ways to have those emotional needs for support met elsewhere outside of the lawyer's office or the mediator's office, it's going to be more effective. It's probably going to be cheaper because you can get through stuff faster. I think that's a really important one. And then you kind of hit on a lot of it. It's just kind of prepare as much as you can. Think about what type of schedule is going to work best for your kids. Think about even if you can prepare future budgets ahead of time and start to look at what the different people's incomes are and how we're going to split the expenses, those types of things. Of course, people always have questions about, well, how do we know what child support or spousal support is going to be? Obviously, that's a little bit of a wild card before you maybe not going to know that, but just thinking about kind of what those expenses are, what those debts are. Yeah, I think those are my tips.
Yeah, I think that's super solid. I think it helps too, um, because I think professionally we know you mentioned you see the tears and you hear the yelling, and we know professionally, but we're both also divorced, so we've been here,
It's
and
not
so
fun. It's not
yeah,
fun. We
right.
get it.
We know what it
Yeah.
looks like, and we know
Yep.
sometimes how long it can take if you
Yep.
don't. And I'm not saying you weren't prepared, but I know I didn't prepare
Oh,
well.
I wasn't
Oh
either.
gosh, right? And
No.
then I know how much more that can play in and be hard. So this is great. This is gold. Thank you so much, Rachel. I know
Yeah.
everybody that watches this is going to be able to pull something out of it. So yeah,
Thanks,
great.
Taylor.
Yeah, have a great rest of your day.
You too.